In today's lesson, we're going to go over transformations of cubic and quartic graphs. You'll notice as we start to go through this, it looks an awful lot like quadratic transformations with a couple of small differences. So let's look at all of our rules. And this is a great little sheet of paper to print off and have with you anytime you're working on your practice problems or quizzes. So you see that they have the same transformations as we went over with quadratic. We have our horizontal translation, which means it's moving left or right. And that is being added or subtracted inside our parentheses. We have our vertical translation, which means it's moving up or down, which happens outside the parentheses. We have reflection, which just means that there's a negative in front, which flips our graph over the x or y axis. We have a horizontal stretch or shrink, which isn't as common as the other ones, but that means that something's being multiplied inside our parentheses with our x. And our vertical stretch or shrink, which is being multiplied outside the parentheses. Alright, so let's look at our first example. And we see that our parent function for our cubic function is f of x equals x to the third power. And so although our transformations aren't very different, our actual graph has changed. Our parent function of x cubed looks like this. So when any transformations we make are going to be to this parent function instead of the parabola we're used to. So when we compare our two equations, we see this minus 9 on the end is how it's changed. And we recognize that that's our k value, which moves our graph up or down. And so because it's a negative 9, we're going to move down 9 units. We see it's moving by 2s. So our new will go here, and the rest of our graph will stay the same. And our second equation is looking at a quartic graph. We know that because it's being raised to the fourth power. So first, let's graph our parent function, which shows us we're at negative 2, positive 16, which would be off our graph. We can go negative 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1. It goes up from there. So you see our quartic can tend to look a lot like our parabola at times. Every now and then it'll have an extra little dip at the bottom once we make our transformations. So let's look at our new equation. We see that a lot of things are going on here. We have a negative, which shows me there's going to be a reflection across the x-axis. We see there's a 5, which shows us there's going to be a vertical stretch by a factor of 5. And we see there's a minus 2, which shows us it'll be left or right, but opposite of what we think, so it's going to move right 2. Alright, so let's graph our transformed function. So first we see the negative 5. So we know it's going to be flipped, and instead of going over 1, up 1, it'll go over 1, down 5. Which puts this point here. And then we see that we also see that it moved to the right 2, and so we know it would be over 2. And our other function would, our other point would be at 2, negative 2. And there's our new function.